Broadcasting from the studio at the Levan Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University, welcome to Levan Center Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, innovators, and those that foster the Florida business ecosystem.
Hi, and welcome back to Levan Center Live. Welcome back, subscribers, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jim Ryan from the Levan Center of Innovation here at Nova Southeastern University. And of course, I'm joined by my good friend and colleague here, Kelly Shanley, who's interim director of the Levan Center. And Kelly, so great to be with you again, my friend.
Good to be with you, buddy.
So we talk to entrepreneurs, successful executives, those that foster the business ecosystem. Today's podcast is something special. We're going to talk guitars, pasta, cell phones, and of course, business, all those things wrapped around this entrepreneur today, Andy Cagnetta, who's CEO of Transworld Business Advisors. And Andy, it's getting around lunchtime. I'm interested in pasta first, but let's start with, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time out to be on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored. It's great to be here in the Alan Levan Center of Innovation. Love it. Love this place.
It is a special place, and we have a wonderful studio here. And again, thanks for the time. So, how we start, we kind of bifurcate this a little bit. We talk about your background,
Sure.
Early beginnings, maybe some challenges that you had growing up, and we pass along those nuggets to some founders that might be listening. And then the second part of it is really talking about your work with Transworld Business Advisors and the successes, challenges that you had there. And those are some great key learnings that can be passed on as well to our listeners. So let's wind the clock back a bit. And so let's share with, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Verona, New Jersey, if you couldn't hear it in my voice yet. So a little bit of a New Jersey accent. And yeah, I grew up in Verona, New Jersey. It was a great place to grow up, very middle-class kind of town. And went to college at Lehigh University, and it was a great place. Yeah.
And then go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was gonna say, am I right that then coming out of college, you kind of hit the entrepreneur circuit pretty quickly?
Yeah. So I came out of college, and I didn't do well in college, and that was probably a function of either the beer drinking or the extracurricular activities. I just wasn't mature enough to kind of really put my nose to the grind. So then I started as an engineer, and I really didn't like it. And so when you don't like something, you probably don't put a lot of time and effort into it. Wound up in the business school, did very well in the business school, okay, and it was kind of too little too late. So, but I came out of college, and it was a little tough time, 87, and the economy was kind of not great. And so I was bartending and waiting tables. And I said, maybe I'm going to start a business. My cousin happened to be in the cell phone business. And so I started a little cell phone business. And I was selling cell phones for $2,000 a piece and installing them in cars. If you remember, right? Yeah. Actually drilling holes in the roofs of brand new cars with putting antennas up. And
for those early entrepreneurs that wanted to be James Bond, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, people were really kind of geeked out by, I'm calling you from my car, kind of thing. And then the bag phones came out, and then the little brick phones. And we were selling those phones, and it was funny how quickly the industry changed, because we were making like $200 a line, and then we were making $200 or $300 every time we installed a phone or sold a phone. And it quickly went to, they were giving away phones. Like the industry changed almost overnight. And so I was out of business.
Yeah.
And so, that was my kind of first entrepreneurial gig. I did get into a couple more along the way, including selling guitars for a little while, which was a lot of fun. And I was in the guitar industry. I worked for Kramer for a little while. My family manufactured guitars for 100 years. But that business was no longer around. And again, selling guitars, going door to door or music store to music store, selling guitars and instruments and anything I could get my hands on as a manufacturer's rep. That was another little business. Didn't make money doing that. And wound up buying after a music industry stint, wound up buying a pasta shop in Hartford, Connecticut with my family members, my two cousins. And we called it Cugina's, which means in Italian means cousins. And we bought it for $45,000. Ran it for a couple of years. Ran into the first Gulf War, which was 1991, and quickly were scrambling. And we didn't realize how seasonal the business was. You know, you think it. And so we had such a great holiday season where we're selling lots of everything that had to do with Italian food, like pastas and sauces and cakes and cookies. And then all of a sudden January 1 came around and we're like, middle of the winter, it's in Connecticut. Who's going to stop at a specialty store when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground? And then the Gulf War breaks out, and we did a lot of catering, and people were canceling their Super Bowl parties, and people were, so we were scrambling to kind of make money again. And so I got another lesson in entrepreneurship of, it's time to go. So I put the business up for sale. And then by the time the summer rolled around, all of a sudden business was back. I'm like, wait a second. It's like, maybe I shouldn't sell now. And a buyer came forward and bought the business. So I bought it for $45. We sold it for $65, and I thought it was a genius. So, and from there, I had met my wife in the process. She grew up here in South Florida. And so that kind of prompted us to come to South Florida. And I said, well, I bought a business before. I had started the cell phone business. I had started the guitar business, made money in neither of those things. But this business that I bought, day one, we were making money, and we made a little money along the way. I probably sold it for too little now that I know what I know in the business, right? And I didn't use a business broker because I didn't know one existed. I didn't know such a thing existed. And so when I came down to Florida, my wife grew up down here, and I started to look to buy business and ran into Transworld one day as a customer and was impressed with the 2 people that owned it, Don and Bonnie Parrish, great people. He was a 30-year IBMer, worked at NASA on some of the moon launches, and eventually came down here to South Florida with his wife. She was a realtor then became a business broker. They bought Transworld. And they were running it and invited me to join the team. So I joined the team, sold 9 businesses in my first year, and I'm like,
so you
wow.
You actually came in as a broker employee, working for the 2 of them that had the established business.
Yeah. So I came in and I loved the business. I'm like, wow, this is good business. I mean, I sell one thing a month and I'm a hero. Right. I thought it was kind of a New York, kind of New Jersey attitude. It was like, I felt like things were going in slow motion, and not a lot of people were answering their phones. And I'm like, wow, if I give good service and if I work really hard, I could be successful in this thing. And then 2 years into it, Don's full retirement was kicking in at IBM. And I said to him, listen, I came here to buy a business and I came here to build something. So why don't you sell me Transworld? And he said, okay, can we get this done next week? I said, okay. And I bought the company.
So he was that anxious to retire.
It was pretty funny, doing due diligence now back then. And he was having a tough time. It was 1997. It was a little bit of a kind of a downturn in the economy around here. And so I bought it at the right time.
How cyclical is this stuff? Like, if you look at the where your business fits in the larger economy, is it a leading indicator? Is it a lagging indicator?
A lot of times we're lagging, because even I remember in 2008, we really didn't have a bad year until 2009. And really the world was melting down in 2008. Even 2007 was, rough. Starting to have a rough, and we had a great year in 2007, and we didn't have a bad year in 2008. Again, you think about it, we're selling businesses, valuation is based on past financials, which really shouldn't be. It's based on future earnings, but the simple man's way of looking at a business and deciding what its value is, we're going to look at 3 years of tax returns, and we're going to figure out how we're going to do a projection out into the future. And unless you already know that the economy is going down, you're going to say, okay, well, it'll keep doing well, and that's what we're going to value the business at. So until that business starts to turn down, perhaps the value doesn't go down, and therefore our commissions didn't go down. So we do lag a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, so, what is the pitch for Transworld Business Advisors? And then, but I want to, that's the second part of the question. The first part of the question is, why were you successful in taking the sort of this legacy business, Transworld Business Advisors, and really moving it into the next level, which it is today?
Yeah, I think a few things. On one level, I always say that I treat it as a business and not as a brokerage. So a lot of business brokers at the time, I always described them as, used car salesmen when I was looking to buy business. And Don and Bonnie were different. He was an IBMer. He had systems. He understood marketing. I came in. I had a marketing background from, Lehigh and owning my own businesses. I realized, hey, the more I market, the more I'm going to sell. So I always had the approach of, this is a numbers game. I need to market my business first. That's my first thing I need to do is market myself. And I was, even in South Florida, when I came down here and I was an agent before I owned the company, my first thing was to go to chamber meetings, get involved in the community, get out there every single night I could possibly get myself out there, pass out my card. Because again, to build a business, you have to market first. You really do.
All right. People might not be familiar with how much you have grown Transworld. So can you give us a little sense of the scale when you bought it?
Yeah,
scale
so
now?
I bought the company, and I could kind of say this out loud now, but I bought the company for $50,000, and it's funny because I borrowed $75,000 to buy the business, and I ran out of money 3 months later. And I did borrow the money from my father-in-law. Thank you, Dr. Joel Martin, and his wife Susan, and he's a fantastic guy, and he backed me when I needed him. And so 3 months later, I went to him and said, "I'm out of money," and it was not a good conversation with my wife in the room, and God bless him. He took this ridiculous risk. I still yell at him. I'm like, you risked your money with some 32-year-old snot-nosed kid, and he's like, it was the best bet I ever made. And I'm like, so we bought the company. We were 6 people at the time. We were upstairs from the Fish Peddler on Commercial Boulevard in this little office, and we were a small little company. We were selling maybe 20, 30 deals a year. We eventually grew. And part of, how we've been successful is bringing on partners and raising capital. We did raise money in a thing called the Capco program here in Florida that was started by Governor Childs. A fraternity brother from Lehigh was involved in a New York fundraising / venture company that was called New Tech, that is now known as New Tech.
Sure.
And New Tech invested in Transworld in 1999. So I bought it in 97. 99, they gave me $3 million for a .com business plan. And April of 2000.
That was a lot of money back then.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was hysterical. Like, one of the funniest stories was I used to go to Bank of America, or what was Barnett back then, and I walk in and I'd give them a commission check and they'd stamp it, hold for 4 days, never get right. Yeah. And so I walked in one day with a commission check after I got the $3 million, and I deposited it in the bank, and it was Bank of America, and they stamp it, hold for 4 days or 3 days, 5 days. And I said, for a guy who has $3 million in the bank, you wouldn't think you have to hold my checks anymore. Right. And they said, "Who's your private banker?" I said, "What's a private banker?" Right. And so, you learn these things all of a sudden, and all of a sudden, like that commercial where the door opens and people are drinking champagne in the back, right? So, so we got a private banker. We were able to raise capital with New Tech and start building the company. And I said, "What do I do next?" And they said, "Well, get a bigger office, start hiring people, acquire your competitors, get some other offices around the state." And so we built up to 10 offices throughout Florida. In 2001 and 2002, New Tech went public. They changed their name to New Tech. It was called a Wilshire before that. And they really had a different focus on being a lender and doing other things. They hated the business brokerage business because it was so up and down. It was, we closed a deal one month and they're like, what are you going to do next month? And we're like, we don't know. And then they're like, that's not a good answer for a public company. So we decided to part ways, which was another great moment in Transworld, 2002. And I'm dear friends with Barry Sloan, CEO of New Tech, who was the CEO back then. And it was just great timing for them. They got their money back. We gave them all their money back. And we were able to sell some shares internally and, continue to grow the company. And, we grew the company. So we had 10 offices in Florida. We're doing well in Florida then. And finally we get to a point where, how do we get to Atlanta? How do we get to Charlotte? And we quickly realized that running these offices remotely was not going to work. We needed people on the ground that were invested. And we're like, well, what's a way for people to invest in, be partners? And we're like, franchise it. That sounds like a good thing to do. And one of my big things when I came into Transworld, again, I was 32 years old when I bought the company. Everybody had more business experience than me. And I said to everybody, I said, listen, my job is to give you the tools to succeed. You tell me what you need, and I'm going to give you those tools. So when we looked to franchise, we quickly realized we do not have the tools to succeed. We better find those tools. And we were introduced to United Franchise Group, who most famously now own Sinorama, and they own Venture X, and they own Great Greek, and they own a lot of brands. And they're a company that takes franchise brands and grows them incredibly well. And now we have 250 offices around the world. And, it's pretty incredible.
Man.
1,000 people. It's
let me
crazy.
ask you this. Along that way, you're growing. The game gets different for you, right? I mean, we talk about companies scaling here and whether the CEO is good in all those stages. How did it change for you? Did you find yourself?
Yeah, it's so funny you
Feeling
say
like the
that.
right
because
guy?
it is a different model. Because you were running, you were the CEO,
Yes.
president, owner, operator of an entity, and then you pivoted to go to a franchise model, still being the owner of the overall organization, but it's certainly a different model.
Yeah, and it's funny because we're still running those two models. So it's funny you say that because I think there's kind of like in the beginning of a company, there's kind of like four different owners kind of personalities. There's the startup guy, and I wasn't the startup guy. I came to Transworld, it was already established. And so there's the startup guy. And a lot of times the startup guy is not good at hiring people and running a small organization and putting in systems. So then there's the next person who comes in and kind of grows the company, by putting things into place. And that was kind of me. And then there's the third phase of really growing your company and kind of taking it to the next level and being a more corporate kind of setting. And oftentimes, number two guy, number three guy cannot be the same person without a lot of growth and development. And I often say to my partners, the guys who invested in Transworld early on and who are still with me as my partners, I say, hey, thanks for hanging in with me as I changed.
Right.
Because, they could have gotten someone who was way more talented or way more, had a lot more of experience. And, you see a lot of entrepreneurs go through that because they can't make it to the next level. And you hear about all these second generation and third generation businesses that don't make it because the kids aren't the right people. Yeah. And then there's the fourth phase, where even Transworld is getting to that point now where it's such a big company that there's a lot of risk moving forward, that there's a lot of investment that have to happen in things like AI and automation and taking it to the next level, that it really needs, a kind of organized capital structure where people could take more risk than an individual.
So, Andy, what is for those that are not familiar in this process, buying businesses, getting your business ready to sell? What is the value proposition of Transworld Business Advisors?
Yeah, the most important thing you could do when you're going to sell your business is run your business. And going through the sale process is a difficult process, and it is fraught with all kinds of landmines along the way. And any one of those landmines can kill your deal. Even with us being professionals and understanding those landmines, deals still die. So it could be the number one financial transaction of your life as an entrepreneur, and you want to make sure you get it right. And you might only have one shot with the right buyer. And it's so critical to have someone along for the ride that makes sure that you're properly exposed in the market, that you get the right buyer at the right price. And on top of it, you get through all the things you need to get through to get closed. And on top of all that, it's not like nailing a sign to a house or to a commercial piece of property. We have to, for the most part, 99% of the time, keep it confidential through that process.
I got to imagine that through all of these processes, you've learned obviously a lot about negotiation. I'm sure you coach on negotiation and human nature at that. What are some takeaways that you have from the negotiation process that all the rest of us could use about being better at that?
So there's a few things that I kind of always lean on when negotiating. By the way, I think one of the greatest negotiating books is Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference, hostage negotiator for the FBI, CIA, FBI, whatever. And he does a great job because it really, in a long process of selling your business or any long sales cycle, you really can't bloody the other side because they'll bleed to death before the deal is done. So it really is it's finesse, getting people to do, and Cialdini is great with understanding how to influence people as well. So one of my sayings is, number one, people get crazy around money.
Yeah.
And you could see that in your own family. You could see that with friends. When all of a sudden money comes into play, it could be as easy as going out to dinner with someone or as big as, watching families settle estate issues. Right. People go nuts. So the best thing you could do is have a plan and have everything in writing. So that's another thing we bring to the table, that we're going to plan out this process. And we're going to make sure that everybody understands their roles, and we have it in writing.
So basically, you're helping shepherd the whole through the whole process.
It's keeping people. It's trying to manage the emotions of the process. It's hard for sellers. It's their baby. They're selling, and a lot of them are not ready for the transition into retirement and doing something else in their life. And all of a sudden they panic at the end because all of a sudden they realize it's ending, and they want to hold on. And then the buyers, of course, they're scared. They don't know everything about the business. They don't know, and they're scared that they're making a bad investment and I try to reassure everybody through the process. I tell buyers, you're moving to a place like Florida. The population is growing just about every single year we're here. The economy is, for the most part, except for the things that I mentioned before, maybe 9/11, dot-com boom, COVID, economic downturn. No matter what happened here in Florida, the downturns were short-lived.
Yeah.
And there was always a boom afterwards.
Yeah.
So if you come in here and you buy a business and you do the right thing and you work hard and you answer your phone and you give good service, you can't help but do well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So if you buy a business or even start a business, if you have the right formula, you can make money. If you work hard, you should be okay.
You're probably at a sort of an epicenter for data now. So many years operating, and you must know and have sort of an assessment already as to when opportunities come in through the transom, what deals are going to be attractive and what deals are not going to sell for a nice multiple. For those that may be listening today, how would you how if they're thinking about that moment, that stage now where they're thinking about exiting, what advice would you give them in sort of at this stage to prepare for that? What type of deal is looking attractive? What kind of margins or what? Share some information on that.
Yeah. So I always tell people quality and quantity of earnings drive multiples. So quantity is easy. Quantity is if your business is making $100,000, it may be worth 2 times. If your business is making $500,000, it may be worth 3 times. If it's worth making $1 million, it may be worth 4 to 5 times. If it's making $10 million, it may be worth 6 to 8 times. So the more money the business is making, the higher the multiple, and that's just risk, right? If you buy a business that's making $10 million and you lose $1 million doing something stupid, you still made 9. Mm-hmm. If you buy a business that made $500,000 and you make $1 million mistake, you're out of business. So it's just a risk thing. Number 2 is quality of earnings. And what's quality of earnings? Quality of earnings is, can I see the earnings on your books and records? Do you have good books and records? Do you have good systems? Do you have proper inventory counts? Do you have good management in place, or are you the chief cook and bottle washer? Kind of an E-Myth thing, do Michael Gerber? Do you have your business systematized? So the more and what kind of earnings are your earnings recurring, or are they one-offs? And like you look at Transworld, we're a very transactional business. Newtek didn't like us back then. Again, we were very transactional. Yeah. We want you to be a recurring revenue business. Yeah, well, me too, but we're not.
Right. You can only sell maybe that one business 1 or 2 times.
Well, I mean, we have sold some businesses 5 times here in South Florida, but it's not usual, right? It's a very one-time transaction. Certainly with that one buyer or seller, it's a one-time. I shouldn't say that. We had some great entrepreneurs that have bought, landscaping company, and I think I've even introduced them, but Jeff and they own, and his brother, why am I forgetting his name? But Jonathan own a landscaping business. They bought 8 businesses from us, and they've built their company to be like, I think they were telling me they're going to do 30 or 40 million this year. So, and this is 2 brothers that met down here in college. So
that's a great story.
Yeah. So quality and quantity of earnings. So you want to work to get your business where the quantity of earnings again, we're selling a business based on the earnings path. So if your earnings are going up, that's good. If it's flat, that's okay. If the earnings are going down, that's going to be a problem. And then how can it be financed? So the better books and records you have, then the SBA is going to be able to finance it. Buyers are going to be able to come in for 10% or 5% down. And that's way more attractive, and therefore your business will sell for more. So as a seller, you want to have the right systems in place, have good books and records, make sure you have good management in place, that not every one of them is your family member going to leave. And you have the capacity to grow. You actually have your business kind of set up and be able to look at a buyer and say, listen, you do the right thing in this business. The way we have it set up, you can do 2 or 3 times what we're making now.
Let's talk like influences and mentors for a moment. When you look back on your career and what you've done and maybe kind of who you've become as a business owner, leader, manager, can you point to anything, anybody as, you don't have to use names, but influences on you? Where did it come from?
It's funny. When I first came down here, I just wanted to meet Wayne Huizenga.
Yeah.
Just like his name was everywhere. And then, I did get a chance to meet him a few times, him and Marty, and just their philanthropy, the way they were down to earth. I mean, he was a tough businessman, but for sure. But there's so many great leaders down here in South Florida that I've met. And of course, family members like my grandfather, a super hardworking guy, my dad and mom, and, my in-laws, certainly have shaped who I am. My daughters have shaped who I am, made me a better man for understanding having daughters.
Yes.
It's definitely changes you. As a frat boy growing up
in
a house of 3 boys.
Right.
I grew up in a house of 3 boys, we were throwing punches before we're going to talk to each other. And, So there's a lot of influences down here. I mean, some of the great nonprofit leaders like Melissa Aiello, who I was really close with before she passed, and Kathleen Cannon, and just like the great, even Alan Levan, the namesake of it, watching and reading his book, and he, just the way that those people operated down here, Joe Amatoro. I mean, just some really cool people I've gotten to meet down here. And even the people that work for me have shaped who I am. My partner, Ray Titus, and the people who have worked for us for, 20 and 30 years. So,
yeah.
Andy, I want to talk about, because you started with, you mentioned philanthropy, and that's a sort of part of your DNA and a lot of the work that you do. I know you're on numerous boards.
Right.
And, pasta, I'm a big fan of pasta. I want to hear and I want you to share about your dinners that you do. So kind of talk about your philanthropy and some of the work that you do.
Yeah, it's funny. I said it earlier, like I was really kind of wound up about getting involved in the community. And I said earlier as well that I grew up in a very middle-class family, and I always felt lucky and privileged. I never wanted for a meal. Certainly I knew when my dad got paid, it'd be like 5 pastas in a row. But, it was a very middle-class family.
Yeah.
I mean, I was extremely lucky. So I always felt that, I had something to give back because I was so lucky. And I understand that people aren't so fortunate. And getting involved down here in South Florida, I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce, was at a networking group, and LifeNet for Families was there. There was called Cooperative Feeding at the time, which is a soup kitchen, best described, on Broward Boulevard. They do a lot of other things. And she was crying at the meeting. And I'm like, why are you crying? She's like, our air conditioner on the soup kitchen has gone out, and nobody's going to fix it. The landlord won't fix it. We don't have the money. People are dropping. The chef won't cook. It's 120 degrees in there. And, everybody's sitting around eating lunch, and I'm like, okay, is anybody going to help her?
Right.
And so I'm like, I'll help you. And she's like, what are you going to help? And so wound up, I leaned on a few AC companies that we had worked with in the past. And we put a new air conditioner on in that charity. And, Marty Foreman, who is amazing, talking about someone who shaped me, amazing nonprofit leader here in South Florida. And she looked at me and she said, well, you be on my board. And I said, what's a board? I mean, that's how naive I was about how nonprofits worked. And so I became on the board, eventually became chairman. We built the building we had on Broward Boulevard. And I looked at the board and I said, hey, we don't have any money. We all need to do something. I don't care what you do. And I said, I'm going to cook Sunday dinner for my family and friends right here, because we used to serve in the morning, and we still do serve meals in the morning because, long story, it's tough neighborhood. You don't want people roaming around at night. So I said, I'm going to take a night. I'm going to cook for everybody here at LifeNet. And we did that, and it started with raised $300. We had about 30, 40 people come, and I cooked with my mom and my aunt, and actually Arnold Abbott, another great guy down here in South Florida, was running his charity. He came in and helped. And so we did it year after year there. And in the 4th year in, I was in Leadership Broward, another great thing to get involved in. And one of my fellow classmates, Michael Berry, came to the event, and he was general manager of the Signature Grand. And he said, you can't have this here anymore. There's too many people. It was crowded. He said, you got to have it at the Signature Grand. And I said, well, I can't afford that. And he said, we're underwriting it. We're going to do this for free. And so they did for years. I mean, and God bless Arlene Pecora and everybody and so 22 years in, last year, we brought in a little over $300,000. We've raised over $2 million. And
that's a lot of pasta.
900 to 1,000 people show up every year.
That's terrific. Wow. That is amazing.
So you're gonna need a new home.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Signature Grand is gone. We usually have it in February. That time is come and gone. And I had a call this morning, believe it or not,
really,
about the next one. And those spoilers out there, but it looks like we may do it at the Galleria Mall.
Oh, wonderful!
Oh, yeah.
And
right.
And so they're excited about it. Some of the people that plan it are excited. Cloud9 and Jessica Rodriguez, she's working hard, and I think we're going to do it in September this year. So
That's really great. It's good to hear you found a new home for it. And this Jim's question on the tail end of you talking about your influences in your life, it kind of makes sense because everybody you were talking about, while they were good business people, were also really involved in the community. And I don't think there's anybody else I know who is more, say, intentional than you and Allison about the way you give back to the community. You really get in there and figure out, it's like a strategy of how you're going to do it and who you want to be in this community. And it's been impressive. Kind of tell us how you're thinking about that.
Well, we didn't have the money, right? So, you see all these names on the buildings, and it's because they gave money. And I'm certainly not slighting because, again, Wayne and Marty and those people rolled up their sleeves too. And we watched that example. And, you have your time, treasure, or talent to give to a charity. And number one is time. You could volunteer. Number two was talent. And so even at LifeNet, I was like, what can I do for, LifeNet? And I was treasurer at the time. And they gave me a key to the place. And on Saturdays, I used to go in and help them with their QuickBooks and eventually balance their books. Now, that's probably, anybody listening out there, that's probably not a good thing for board members to do, talking about proper governance. But, that's what I did. And then, eventually we got to the point where I had some money to give as well. And again, for Allison and I, and Allison does such a fantastic job at the United Way, JA, and especially Pace Center for Girls. She's been involved with Pace Center. And I got involved with Pace Center because I was working with Bank of America on their Heroes Award and got to meet Aggie and Pappas, and she does a great job there. And I ran up to Aggie after that meeting. I said, I have someone for you. And, but Allison and I, we feel pretty strongly that we wanted our kids involved. We wanted to give back to our community. I believe, listen, we're here in this community. We're making money as a business people. We almost have an obligation to take care of it, and help out and be the answer. So that's, why I love the Broward Workshop and the Alliance and the other business organizations that are focused in on the problems and getting involved. We realize it's going to be more than, you can't just look to the nonprofits. You can't look to government. You can't look, but if you all get together, the government, the police force, the nonprofits, the business people, the religious organizations, the universities, the hospitals, if we all get together and we look at things like homelessness and we look at things like hunger and we look at things like mental health and we look at things like all these things that, that are, we need to take care of. Mm-hmm. And especially in this day when, maybe the government is looking to not be so involved in that and cutting back on funding. It's going to be up to us, the individuals in the community, to kind of pitch in.
I love that sort of blueprint how you laid out, and you could certainly take that where you're talking about that sort of that model and replicate that city through city, where you got these community organizations kind of working together collaboratively to help support their neighborhoods, their communities. Right. So I want to mention a few minutes that we have left, and I know I mentioned all of your philanthropic work, which occupies a lot of your time these days. As you're looking in the crystal ball with your wife, what's next for you as you look at next for Transworld?
Yeah, I mean, I just turned 60 this year, so that's kind of a reason to.
I'm right behind you, my friend.
Right. So. It's we're looking forward, hopefully, to having grandkids soon, and we have a daughter getting married, and Allison and I do want to do a little bit more traveling. We want to leave Transworld, of course, in good hands with whoever is going to take it over, and I have some great people running the corporation now. I have a full-time president at the franchise. I have a full-time vice president and operations people that run things. People ask me, well, how do you spend your day? It's like, well, a third of Transworld Florida, a third of the franchise, and a third in the nonprofit world. So
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of
Right.
It takes up a lot of my time, and I could see myself doing more of that, getting more involved in the community, and helping out. Even we're supporters here at Nova Southeastern University and the Levan Center, and doing more things like that, helping out entrepreneurs. Who knows?
That's terrific. How do people get a hold of Transworld Business Advisors? How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, tworld.com is our website, and you could simply go and just inquire through the website. And I'm all over the place. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I do answer my messages if you ping me. If you want to email me, ac@tworld.com. I'll eventually get to you. I like talking to young entrepreneurs. I get to talk to people. I get to talk to people about getting involved in their community. I do enjoy that. And, we could always use the help out there. And, Jarrett Levan and I have that conversation a lot. And we used to have it 10 years ago, talking about the Terry Styles and the Dwayne Izingas and the Miniachi family. Who's next?
Yeah.
Like who's going to step up
Right.
and be naming buildings? And you're watching it. There's some great people in town. The Falcones and Kenny Styles. There's the second generation of guys, and the Steve Hudsons, and you're watching these guys that come out, Tim Petrillo. I mean, guys who are getting involved in their community. They're making, hopefully, I love capitalism. I love people being able to go out there and make money and give back. And so, I think the other good thing about South Florida is, a lot of people would come here, relocate, like me, damn Yankee, come down here, relocate, and then, pass away and give away all their money to their hometown.
Back up north, right?
Yeah, and it's like, whoa, wait a second here, and so I won't do that, just for the record out there in the world. My money will stay mostly here.
We'll
in
let the
South
folks in
Florida.
Jersey know.
Yeah, sorry, Jersey. So, but I think people are being born here and now growing up here and now making a life.
Generations
for themselves.
now, for sure.
And we have generational, and there will be generational wealth. It's the biggest wealth transfer in the world. Baby boomers have to sell their businesses in the ridiculous numbers, and so the future's bright for down here in South Florida.
I do want to plug your podcast, to Coffee with Cagnetta. I had a chance. Encourage our listeners to listen to that podcast as well, because also you two, I listened to you as a guest.
Yeah, we had Kelly on.
And I
Great.
love that. I had a chance, and I've known Kelly for a while now, and I got a chance to pick up a few things that I'll harass him about for sure. And so Coffee with Cagnetta, although you and I did talk about having a podcast with Pasta with Cagnetta.
Yeah, there you go.
The challenges of, maybe spicing it up and
right.
during a podcast, and maybe, trying out different types of pasta through that experience. Who knows? We'll see where that goes.
And we have another podcast, the Deal Board podcast, that talks about buying and selling businesses. So that's another. We have 200 episodes under our belt under that one.
Well, that's
So,
amazing.
yeah,
That's terrific. So you're a pro at this, and we saw it firsthand. So I want to thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast, and thanks for all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you.
In the
Appreciate
community, helping support obviously not only employees that you've had for many years, but also all the philanthropic work that you do to help so many others. So. Andy Cagnetta, President, CEO of Transworld Business Advisors. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Center Live podcast, and follow us on all social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the podcast, please email Levan Center Live. Our email is innovation@nova.edu.